So, if you're a person like me who values comfort the most, then you must either be owning a pair of UGG boots or you're missing out on the best gift to your feet in the history of mankind. They're so comfortable, I even wear my wife's pair sometimes. She hates when I do that, but I guess I can take the risk. It has become a morning routine along with my perfect instant coffee. Just scoop, stir, and sip. Kind of makes me feel like I'm on top of the world. But wait, have you ever stopped to wonder what's actually on your feet? And what goes into that small pouch of instant coffee that makes it so instant yet delicious? Well, today we're peeling back the fluff and foam to see exactly how UGGs are made in the factories and the crazy process behind instant coffee. Trust me, you'll never look at your morning routine the same way again. So slip on those UGGs, grab your coffee, and let's get into it. Every UGG boot starts with one thing: sheepskin. Only the best sheepskins make the cut to become UGG boots. This careful picking is the first step in making sure your feet are happy and cozy. Once they have piles of perfect sheepskin, it's time to cut it up into the pieces that will become a boot. But how do they cut sheepskin so precisely and make sure they get the most pieces out of each skin? Cutting sheepskin is not like cutting regular cloth. It's thick and stretchy, so it needs special tools and skills. In the factory, they use big machines that have sharp blades to cut through the sheepskin. Think of it like a giant cookie cutter for fabric. They have patterns for all the different parts of the UGG boot: the front, the back, the sides, and all the little pieces that make it look and feel just right. Skilled workers lay out the patterns on the sheepskin and then use the machines to cut out each piece super carefully. They try to cut in a way that wastes as little sheepskin as possible because sheepskin is valuable stuff, man. And the cutting part is important to make sure all the pieces fit together perfectly later. Now that they have all the sheepskin pieces cut out, it's time to start putting them together to make the shape of a boot. But how do they stitch sheepskin so it's strong and looks good at the same time? Well, stitching sheepskin is a special job. Regular sewing machines aren't always strong enough for thick sheepskin. So, in the factory, they use heavy-duty sewing machines that are made for tough materials. Workers carefully line up the edges of the sheepskin pieces and stitch them together. They use strong thread and special stitching techniques to make sure the seams are, really strong and won't come apart even when you wear your UGGs a lot. They stitch the front piece to the back piece and then add the side pieces. Slowly, piece by piece, the flat pieces of sheepskin start to turn into the 3D shape of a boot. UGG boots are famous for being super comfy inside. A big part of that comfort comes from the insole, the soft part inside the boot that your foot rests on. Let me take you through the process that makes it happen. The insole is like the cozy carpet inside your UGG boot. It's usually made of more soft sheepskin or sometimes other comfy materials like foam. In the factory, they cut out the insole shapes, just like they cut out the boot pieces, but these pieces are shaped to fit perfectly inside the bottom of the boot. For sheepskin insoles, they might use a softer, fluffier type of sheepskin. For foam insoles, they cut sheets of special soft foam to the right shape and thickness. Sometimes they even add extra layers of cushioning to make the insole even softer. The insole is then stitched or glued to the bottom of the boot. This insole is what makes walking in UGGs feel like walking on clouds. Here's a little twist you might not know. Those UGG boots that are water resistant, well, they don't just magically repel water. Nah, before these sheepskin pieces are even cut, sometimes they're treated to help them resist water and stains. It's like giving the sheepskin a special raincoat treatment, if you will. This treatment is done in big machines that spray a special coating onto the sheepskin. This coating soaks into the fibers and helps to stop water from getting in and stains from sticking. So when you see water-resistant UGGs, know that it's not just luck, it's a special step done right at the start of making the boots. The bottom part of the UGG boot, the sole, is what you walk on. It needs to be strong and grippy so you don't slip. But how do they attach the sole to the soft sheepskin top part so it stays on tight? Well, attaching the sole is a really important step to make sure your Uggs are ready for walking. The soles are usually made of rubber or a strong, flexible plastic. In the factory, they use strong glue to stick the sole to the bottom edge of the sheepskin boot part. It's a special industrial strength adhesive that's made to hold really tight and last a long time, even in cold and wet weather. Machines press the sole and the boot together firmly to make sure the glue sticks well. Sometimes they even stitch around the edge where the sole meets the sheepskin for extra strength. This makes sure the sole stays put so you can walk around without worrying about it coming off. Once the boot shape is all stitched and the sole is on, there are still some finishing touches to make them look like those perfect Uggs you see in stores. So what are these last steps to make sure every boot is just right? The finishing touches are all about making sure each UGG boot looks perfect and is ready to wear. Workers check each boot carefully for any loose threads, marks, or problems with the stitching. It's like a final inspection to make sure everything is top-notch. They might trim any extra bits of sheepskin or thread to make the edges clean and neat. Sometimes they brush the sheepskin to make the wool look fluffy and even. For some styles, they might add extra details like buttons, bows, or labels with the UGG logo. These finishing touches make sure every boot is high quality and looks just like it should before it goes into the box. The last step in making Uggs is getting them ready to be shipped to stores and then, to you. And before shipping comes packaging. Packaging Uggs is important to protect them on their journey from the factory to your feet. Each pair of UGG boots is carefully placed in a box. These are usually sturdy boxes that are designed to fit UGG boots perfectly. Inside the box, they often put paper or stuffing to help the boots keep their shape and stop them from getting squished. They also include things like tags, care instructions, and sometimes even a little card about the UGG brand. The boxes are then sealed up and stacked on pallets ready to be shipped out. From the factory, these boxes travel on trucks, trains, and even ships to stores all over the world until they finally reach you, ready to keep your feet warm and cozy. So that's how UGG shoes are made. From fluffy sheepskin to cozy boots on your feet, it's a long process with lots of steps and care. But now let's switch gears completely. You've got your comfy Uggs on, maybe you're settling in for the morning, or need a boost in the afternoon. What's the next thing you might reach for? Probably a cup of coffee, right? But what about instant coffee? It's so quick and easy. But how do they turn regular coffee into those little granules that dissolve in hot water? Let's find out. Just like Uggs start with sheepskin, instant coffee starts with coffee beans. But what kind of coffee beans do they use for instant coffee, and how do they get them ready for the factory? Making instant coffee begins way before you see those little brown granules. It starts with coffee beans, just like regular coffee, but often they use types of coffee beans that are strong and maybe a bit cheaper for instant coffee. The coffee beans are grown in places all around the world like Brazil, Vietnam, and Colombia. Once the coffee beans are picked, they're shipped to factories. At the factory, the first step is to clean the beans really well to get rid of any dirt, stones, or anything else that, shouldn't be there. Clean beans are the start of good instant coffee. Raw coffee beans are actually green and don't smell or taste like coffee yet. Roasting is the step that brings out that coffee flavor and aroma. You know what I mean. But how do they roast coffee beans in a factory to make them just right for instant coffee? Roasting coffee beans changes the flavor completely. In the factory, they use giant roasting machines that look like big ovens, really. These machines heat up the green coffee beans to really high temperatures. As the beans heat up, they go from boring green lumps to rich, toasty brown, releasing that unmistakable wake up and pay attention coffee aroma. But here's where things get controversial. Roasting is art and science. Mess it up and your coffee tastes like regret. Get it right and you've got liquid gold. For instant coffee, they take it up a notch, roasting the beans darker to pack in that bold, punchy flavor. Why? Well, because weak coffee is a crime. Once they hit peak perfection, the beans are cooled fast, because 1 second too long and you're sipping burnt disappointment. Yeah, no thanks. Now that the beans are roasted to caffeinated glory, it's time for the next step. After roasting, the coffee beans are still whole. To make coffee, you need to grind them up, but how do they grind roasted coffee beans in a factory to get them ready for making instant coffee? Well, in the factory, they use big machines called grinders. These grinders have strong metal parts that crush and break down the roasted coffee beans into smaller pieces, coffee grounds. The size of the coffee grounds is important. For instant coffee, they usually grind the beans to a medium or coarse grind, not too fine like for espresso. Think of it like the size of a grain of salt. Yeah, this grind size is good for the next step, which is making coffee extract. Grinding the beans makes it easier to get the coffee flavor out when they mix it with hot water. And now they have coffee grounds. The next step is to actually make coffee from these grounds, but on a giant scale. How do they brew huge amounts of coffee in a factory to make coffee extract for instant coffee? Brewing coffee in a factory is like making a giant pot of coffee, way bigger than you've ever seen. They take the coffee grounds and put them in huge tanks. Then they pour hot water over the grounds just like you do before you make coffee at home. But in the factory, everything is much bigger and automated. The hot water soaks through the coffee grounds and pulls out all the coffee flavor and caffeine. This liquid coffee is called coffee extract. They might brew the coffee multiple times using fresh hot water each time to make sure they get as much flavor out of the grounds as possible. This coffee extract is like super strong coffee concentrate, ready for the next step to become instant coffee. Here's a surprising twist about instant coffee. Did you know that there are actually two main ways to turn coffee extract into instant coffee granules? The two main methods are called spray drying and freeze drying. Spray drying is like making coffee powder with hot air. Freeze drying is like making coffee crystals by freezing the coffee and then drying it in a vacuum. Both methods make instant coffee, but they do it in very different ways, and they can even affect the taste and look of the final instant coffee. One of the fastest ways to make instant coffee is spray drying. Liquid coffee extract is blasted into a massive heated tower where it's instantly exposed to extremely hot air. As the tiny droplets of coffee extract fall, the heat rapidly removes the water, leaving behind dry coffee powder. This process happens in seconds, creating fine, powdery instant coffee that's easy to dissolve. The powder then collects at the bottom of the tower, ready to be packed and shipped. Spray drying is one of the most efficient ways to produce instant coffee on a large scale, making sure millions of cups get brewed in an instant. The other main way to make instant coffee is freeze drying. This method is a bit more, let's say, complicated than spray drying, but some people think it makes better tasting instant coffee. How does freeze drying work? Freeze drying is like making astronaut ice cream, but for coffee. First, the coffee extract is frozen into a thin layer, almost like a coffee ice sheet. Then, this frozen coffee is broken into small pieces or granules. These frozen coffee granules are then put into a special drying chamber. Inside this chamber, there's a vacuum, which means almost all the air is sucked out. Under vacuum conditions, and with a little bit of heat, the ice in the frozen coffee turns directly into vapor without melting into liquid first. This process is called sublimation because it's dried at a low temperature. Freeze-dried instant coffee often keeps more of the original coffee flavor and aroma. It also tends to look like little coffee crystals rather than fine powder. Whether it's spray-dried or freeze-dried, sometimes instant coffee is too powdery or dusty. To make it easier to use and dissolve, they might make the powder into bigger granules. But how do they turn coffee powder into those little coffee granules you see in jars? Agglomeration is a fancy word for making small particles stick together to form bigger ones. For instant coffee, if the powder from spray drying is too fine, they can make it clump together into granules. They do this by making the coffee powder slightly moist or spraying it with a little bit of steam. This makes the powder sticky. Then they tumble the powder around in a machine. As the sticky powder tumbles, the tiny particles bump into each other and stick together, forming small clumps or granules. These granules are easy to measure, dissolve better in hot water, and don't make as much dust. It's like rolling wet sand into balls. Yeah, the small grains stick together to make bigger shapes. The next step is making sure it's good coffee. Just like with, UGGs, they need to check the instant coffee to make sure it's good quality before it gets packed up. Quality control is a crucial step to ensure every jar of instant coffee is safe, consistent, and full of flavor. In the factory, every stage is carefully monitored. Roasted beans are checked to make sure that they reach the perfect roast level. If they're too light, the coffee will be weak. If they're too dark, the flavor will be off. The coffee extract is tested to confirm it has the right balance of taste and strength. The final instant coffee granules or powder are also inspected to ensure they dissolve properly, have the right texture, and deliver the expected flavor. Additional checks are done for moisture content and to make sure no unwanted materials end up in the coffee. If a batch does not meet the strict quality standards, it's discarded. Only the best coffee makes it to the shelves, ensuring every cup is smooth, rich, and ready to enjoy. The final step is putting the instant coffee into jars or packets so you can buy it and take it home. Packing instant coffee is the final step before it heads to the stores. In the factory, they use automated machines to fill jars or packets with the instant coffee granules or powder. These machines measure out the exact amount of each coffee for each container. For jars, they obviously fill them up and then put on lids that seal tightly to keep the coffee fresh and stop moisture from getting in. For packets, they fill the coffee into foil pouches that are also sealed to keep air and moisture out. The jars and packets are then labeled with the brand name, type of coffee, and instructions for use. Finally, they pack the jars and packets into boxes ready to be shipped to supermarkets and stores all over so you can easily grab your quick coffee fix. And there you have it, from green coffee beans to instant coffee granules in your jar. It's quite a journey, isn't it? It's so satisfying when you just spoon some into hot water, but now you know all the steps and science that go into making that quick cup of coffee possible. From cozy UGGs to instant coffee in your mug, hopefully you've learned a lot about how these everyday items are made. So how do you feel about the video? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe for more amazing content and share it with your friends. And also don't forget to check out other videos on our channel. You surely won't regret it. Thanks for watching.